Hello and welcome one more time. My name is Alex Centeno, and in the internet there aren't any good tutorials about scripting with Python for Davinci Resolve. There are many reasons for it. It's not easy, and I don't think a lot of people really like Python for Davinci Resolve. And maybe what happens is that color correction specialists and editors and that kind of audience, video people, are not that much into coding. Although that is changing, and that is the purpose of this video, to actually make an introduction, a beginner's introduction, so that we know how to start using Python for scripting in Davinci Resolve. So if that interests you, this is the video for you. Let's get to it. Alrighty, so I am here in my browser, and I'm just going to Google, and I'm going to start by the installation of Python. I am on a Mac, and so that's what I'm going to be teaching today, but you can do the same from Windows or Linux. On a Mac, the easiest way is to go to Homebrew. You probably have it on your Mac already, but if not, all you're going to do is go to Google, search for Homebrew, and then arrive at brew.sh, and you're gonna copy paste this, install it on your Mac, and then start with the installation of Python. The installation of Python is super simple. You already have Python on your Mac, so why do we need Homebrew if we already have it? Well, Davinci Resolve needs the version 3.7 or 2.7.13. So Python, I believe it's in version 4 by now. So it might be that your Mac comes with either Python 3 or Python 4 of any version. And so that's what we need to make sure that we have. So how do we install Python 2.7.13? So this is the command that you would type: brew install Python at 2.7.13. Once you go through the prompts, you're going to add the Python installation to your path. This video won't get into the technical aspects of that, but basically what you're going to do is open your bash profile file inside of your home folder. So on your Mac, you have your home folder. Inside of there, you have a hidden file called the bash profile file. You're going to open that, and you're going to add the things. After your installation of Python, you'll see a couple of things that you have to add to that file. Also, you need to add the classes of Davinci Resolve to that file as well. So they're going to look like this. It's going to start with the word export, and then it's going to give the paths to those libraries, and of course to the Python one as well. Let's go ahead and type Python version like this, and what you should see is the Python version 2.7.13. And if you see that, then you're ready to go. So you're going to open Preferences, and from Preferences under System, you're going to go to General, and you're going to make sure that the external scripting is using local, because we're going to be using a terminal window, not the scripting parameters or the console inside of Davinci Resolve. So you just want to make sure that you're in local here, or otherwise it won't work. Open -T. I have named this files T1 through 4. So I have T1, T2, T3, and T4.py. And so I'm going to show you the first one and what I have put in there. So the first line has the declaration that this is going to be interpreted as Python language. So you need this in there. And second, we're going to be importing the libraries, the Davinci Resolve scripting library, and we're going to give it a name of DVR script, and then import the sys library. Python can use an object-oriented programming. In general, there are two kinds of programming. One is procedural, which is one task after the other. And the other one is object-oriented, which is where an object is the one that either has things or does things. So the has things part we call properties. So for example, a car has a color of red. So that would be a property of the car. So the object is the car, property is color, and the value is red. And then the actions or things that the car does, we call methods. And the car drives. So that is an action of the car. So at a basic level, what we're doing here is we're using objects and we're affecting or making the object do things. For example, use methods to get a timeline or add clips to the timeline, things of that nature. So let's start with that in mind. So the first thing is that we define the scripting library as DVR script dot, and basically this notation, what it means is that we're going to call a method, and in this case, the method is named script app, and the value is resolve. And we're going to assign that to the variable resolve. So basically, all we did was assign a variable called resolve with the scripting app resolve. So we called the method script app with the value resolve. We assigned it to the object, which is a variable, resolve. Second, get a project manager. So we're going to create an object called project manager, and that's going to be the result of calling the object resolve with the method get project manager. So we need a project manager, and we call that method. So this action called get project manager happens to be an action taken by the object resolve, which this object resolve we declared here. And now we get an object called project manager. How do we set up a project? Then we're going to ask for the input. So we're going to prompt the user for the name of the project, and that we're going to assign to the variable pname. And then once we fill that out, then we're going to, using the project manager object, we're going to call a method called create project, and we're going to give it a name, and the name is going to be equal to what we entered on the prompt. Hope that makes sense. If not, you can always rewind this video, go back and listen to the explanation again. Let's take a look. So right here, let's hide this. I am in my terminal here, and I'm going to run my T1 script. I could write Python and then the name of the script after that, but since I have a shortcut that I have added to my bash profile file, then I can only just do P, and basically that stands in my computer specifically for the word Python. So P T1.py. I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to ask me for the name of the project, which I'm going to call, in this case, A1. And that created a project called A1 inside of Davinci Resolve. Let's take a look at the second example. So I'm going to open T T2 pi. All right. So I have the same introduction, the same thing all the way to calling my project manager, having called my resolve object with get project manager, and then we're going to get the current project. So the project manager object is going to call a method called get current project, and that I'm going to assign to the word project, which is going to become my object project. And then that object is going to call a method called get media pool. That's going to become my media pool. And then finally, I'm going to import my media by grabbing the object media pool that I created here, and then that is going to call an action or a method called import media, and I'm going to give it a path. In this case, I am just adding a desktop folder that has a couple of files, a couple of video clips in there. So basically, it's just going to import whatever is in this folder like that. All right, let's save this and run it. T2.py. And now we can see that my two clips were added to the media pool. Let's go ahead and try example number 3. Everything else is exactly the same. We get a project manager. We get from that project manager, we get the current project. From that project, we get the media pool. And now we are going to get a media storage. So we're going to call resolve. So our object called resolve is going to get the media storage, and we're going to call that media storage. And then we're going to select some clips. We're going to call a variable MP, and we're going to add the clips to that variable. And then we're going to take the media storage. We're going to call a method add item list to media pool with that path. In other words, basically what we were doing before, except that before we're just adding the path directly here. Now we're just splitting it and putting the path inside of this variable and then adding the variable here. And that is going to return. So when we call that method, it returns our clips, and we're going to assign them to the object called clips. Then we're going to create an empty timeline. We're going to call it TL. I can call it whatever I want. And all of these, obviously, I can call whatever I want. And is going to be from the object media pool. So media pool is going to call an action or a method called create empty timeline. I'm going to call this timeline T1. In other words, it's going to create an empty timeline called T1, and I'm going to return it to an object called TL. All right. I'm going to get the current timeline, and this is a tricky part. So when you create an empty timeline in a project, that empty timeline is not current. It's not selected by default. So you can create a timeline, but not necessarily have it selected or be current. And you can't add or you can't append clips to a timeline that is not the current timeline. Therefore, what we are doing here is that we are saying, go get the current timeline and assign it to timeline. But if timeline is not, in other words, if there's no timeline, then go to the project and get a count of the number of timelines that are in that project. And if it's more than 0, in other words, there's a timeline, then go ahead and identify the timeline that is in the first position. So get timeline by index number 1 from the project and assign it to the name timeline. Once we have it there in this name timeline, then take the object of called project and then set the current timeline to this timeline. In other words, if you don't find a timeline, then if there is a timeline that has been created, which of course we created one in this line, so it's going to find one and it's going to say, oh, position number 1, and since we created only one, then that is the timeline that is going to be there. Then is going to go ahead and place it right here, and it's going to set it as the current timeline of the project. And then finally, now we can append those clips to that current timeline with a method called append to timeline, and we call that from the media pool object. I know it's kind of confusing, especially if you're not very used to programming, but it's not that difficult. Like, especially if you watch this video several times, I know that you're gonna get it. And if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. I try to check all of those and try to answer as much as possible. So yeah, and if you also would like to see other videos, just let us know what would be of most interest to you guys. Excellent. Let's go ahead and run this one. I'm going to save pt3.py. And as you can see, now we created a timeline called T1. And inside of that timeline, we added our clips. We went through a lot of trouble to actually get that timeline to have those clips. So this final script is going to show an easier way of doing that. So I'm just going to delete this. Same thing. We assign a variable MP to the path where our clips are, and we call media storage add item list to media pool with the actual path, media path to all these clips. And we have now an object with the clips. But now, instead of all of that we did before, all we need to do is call media pool create timeline from clips. I'm going to call the timeline this time main timeline, or you can call it whatever you prefer, but I'm going to call it main timeline, and I'm going to add the clips. That's the second parameter of the method, pt4.py. All right, and now we have a timeline called main timeline. In that main timeline, we have our 2 clips, and now we can start grading and whatnot. The important thing is that all of this can be automated, and so I could easily, without having to do all of these, I could just say I'm going to create a project with a particular name that I can ask a prompt for, and I can create a timeline with a specific prompt name as well, and I can add a path that has all my clips to that timeline, and I can even select the editing window so that when I hit enter, I am already presented with the editing window without having to do anything else. Python scripting allows us to do many other things. So this is just a basic introduction to what it does, but you can even grade automatically those clips and set delivery methods and set the delivery to render those projects out with the selected grades altogether. So you don't even grade anything. You just have to create the projects, timelines, clips on the timelines, deliver, grade. The whole thing happens automatically. I hope that this has been helpful. And I think it is, in a sense that you won't find a lot of information about scripting with Python inside of Davinci Resolve. And I think it's very powerful. And I think it just does great things. And I can't wait to see what you guys are going to be creating. Let me know, because I would love to see what you guys create with this information. So if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for new videos to be notified when new videos are posted. And again, comment below, share this with your friends, and I'll see you in the next time. Take care. Bye-bye.